Hi, Kalbir. Thank you so much for coming on to British Aviation Podcast. I really appreciate it. I know I'm going to take up a lot of your time. But so I actually met you through social media, Instagram.
Yes.
And I put on my Instagram about abortion stigma. And that's how we connected. And honestly, like, I've spoken to you so many times and you're really inspiring. But I want you to introduce yourself because you do so much. I mean, you have a day job, but also you do so much in your own time. But particularly, I want you to talk about your book. And your book is called Not Our Daughter. And I want you to explain to people about that book, what it's about, and your inspiration from that.
Okay. My name's Kalbir Bains. I'm an author of a book called Not Our Daughter, The True Story of a Daughter-in-Law. The book's available on Amazon, on Kindle version and paperback. I decided to write this book about, I came out of a divorce about 12 years ago. And what my inspiration behind this book was my divorce, also my mum's journey, which was back in the late 80s and early 90s. My mum got divorced in the early 90s. And what I realized was when I walked away from my marriage, and my mum did back then, I felt a lot hadn't changed. And I walked away in my marriage in 2009. And what I saw there was the pressure from the South Asian community, especially. You know, when we get married, we'll have like 550 guests. But when we go through a bad time, like a divorce, we probably wouldn't even get a handful of people that give you support in our community. And for me, that was a massive thing growing up as a child, and seeing what my mum went through, a silent generation and who's an immigrant to this country, literally didn't get the support because she didn't have the language barrier. And yet I'm an educated person. And I think a lot of people have this stigma where, because you're educated, you can't go through certain circumstances in your life. So, and I don't think domestic abuse or violence discriminates against education, against your sexuality choice, against your gender or anything of the sort. It can happen to any one of us.
Yeah.
So, I'd gone through a lot in my marriage, and a lot of people didn't know what happened behind closed doors. My mum went through a lot in the late 80s. And again, nobody took the time to find out what happened. But if anything, again, that whole gender thing where the woman gets the blame and the man could just walk off. So I found that with myself in 2009, and I just thought enough's enough. And looking and paying attention at the women before me, none of them had broken the silence, and that's what I wanted to do by writing this book. So I decided to speak out on the topics of domestic abuse and violence, abortion in the South Asian community, alcohol abuse, and then looking at weddings and the cost of weddings, how much we're investing. It's a 3 million multi-millionaire business in the South Asian community. And yet we've got 200, so we spend 50,000 to 250,000 on average in a South Asian wedding. And yet we have got the highest divorce rates.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think this is where COVID's brought a reality into things. So for me, it was just raising awareness, openly talking about things I've personally gone through. So it started with me writing the book. From the book, I ended up being recognized on a lot of platforms for awards and things like that. Also, I did Abortion on Trial with Anne Robinson, which was a documentary which Raw TV had done for BBC Two. And I aired on that. They couldn't get a woman to openly talk about her abortion experience on TV. Again, why? Because the shame of, it's a stigma in any community, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But it's an even bigger stigma within the South Asian community. But the problem I found is we're quick to judge people than to find out why they've had one.
Yeah.
Or why did they choose to be pro-choice, or just understand people's experiences. And again, we're so quick to judge, but if we look back in time again, how many people have had an abortion for immigrant reasons? How many people have had an abortion because financially they couldn't afford to bring a child into marriage? How many people have had an abortion because they're not in a stable relationship? And again,
that are married.
Yeah. So, that's the thing. And more abortions happen inside of a marriage than outside of a marriage in the South Asian community. And you'll be amazed. And it's only till you get talking where you find out. So,
Yeah.
and gender selection is a massive one in the South Asian community. Gender selection is a huge one.
Yeah.
How many people overall, regardless of what background you are from the South Asian community, have gone over abroad to abort? And even I know family members from my mother's generation that have done that. And, you know, we don't want to talk about it. And until I opened up about my journey in my family, and once I opened up, this is what I found. My family members started opening up to me to tell me they've had abortion within their marriages,
Yeah.
which shocked me. And then I was like, why had no one spoke to me before I got married? And I was 27 when I got married, so I'm an adult. Why weren't these conversations being taken place amongst us kids and as family? Why were they hidden from us until I've gone through an experience, until I've opened up, or to the individuals in my family that they've opened up to me? And, you know, again, the core reason of my marriage failing was because I wanted the child and my ex-partner didn't want the child. Excuse me. And so, you know, that was like a massive, that was the deal breaker for my relationship. And again, when I left, it was a very quick finger point. I heard this several times, you know, mother's a divorce, now a daughter's a divorce. If anything, I've got to say, I've never looked at myself like that. When I went through a divorce, I did go through that self-pity for about a year. And then after that, I turned it around and I said, you know what, enough's enough. No, I'm okay. I'm still an educated woman. I can go out there and achieve everything I can. My mother's my role model. Someone who didn't even speak English, has brought up 4 children, paid a mortgage, you know, has held a full-time job.
Yeah.
If she can do it, I can do it. So, you know, I decided to break that circle and start talking about things and just putting it into conversations in safe spaces, just so that we can raise awareness and have this as a conversation. That I'm not saying to everyone to go ahead and go and do an abortion, but let's have this conversation with our kids. Let's, you know, talk about proper safe sex, talk about choices. If they were to fall in this situation, what would you do as a parent? You know, because no parents wants to face that. Like, it literally killed my mom to know I went through one. Even in a marriage, it killed her. And I remember for 18 months after I went through my divorce, me and my mum were very close before I got married. And obviously, me going through what I had gone through, I was also, then I closed up quite a lot. So I hadn't expressed how I felt. And then one day after 18 months, I was expressing how I felt to my nan. And my nan actually was the first person to fully express to me how she felt. And being an Amritdari Sikh woman, she, you know, she was like, it's against Sikhi. And again, that was another thing, which, you know, if you look into a lot of things and research, it's against Sikhi. It's in the rite of Sikhism, it's forbidden to put your child through an abortion or to end a life. So my nan told me her values, and as she's opening up, I'm opening up back to her and telling her how I felt and the hurt I found. She said, I wish you'd reached out to us and we would have been able to convince you to have the child, support you, you know. And I was expressing how I felt about that. And then my mum jumped in, tears broken down, and said, the one thing that killed me as a parent was to hear you went through that in your marriage and you didn't even confide in us. You know, no parent wants their child to go through that. So this is where, for me, to talk about things openly is to raise awareness. Hopefully there's parents out there that would talk to their kids. You know, if you're a parent of 3 daughters, let's say, and your child does come home and say she's pregnant outside of wedlock, you know, we need to have these conversations to raise awareness and say, as parents, how are you going to deal with it? You know, and the abortion isn't the only option. What if you were to say, like, okay, the child wants to bring up the child, or you're willing to support that child, you know, and if you're ready to have sex, you should be ready to think about these conversations.
And
A lot of
also,
people don't.
yeah, and also breaking that cycle. We cannot, you know, culturally,
Yes.
it's about breaking that cycle and saying, actually, we need, I think as well, we're a generation now, we need to start leading by example, because we've gone through those experiences.
Yeah.
As you say, your mum's side have gone through those experiences. Where does it end?
Yeah. And when does it stop? Because we keep, again, if our generation's hiding something from the next generation, when are we going to stop? And I'll be honest, I would love to become a parent one day. And when I do become a parent, I will be having those conversations very open with my children, because I want my kids to have a healthy upbringing and to know about what really goes on in this big wide world. So, you know, I would, again, I did have the sex talk when I was 16 with my mum, because my mum being a divorcee, I remember her taking me and my sister out for the day, and it was so awkward for her because we never got treats. Like, and I remember we got to go to the pictures, we got a takeout food, we got a shopping trip, all three in one go. We knew there was something wrong. So literally, and I never forget the irony of it as well. We went to the cinema with my auntie to watch 9 Months. We were late for that, so we didn't end up going into that. We ended up watching Clueless. But when you look at things and you're like, you know, and we knew there was something. So my mum couldn't do that conversation. So we drove us all the way to Derby to talk to my auntie, who took us out to the cinema. And before the film started, sat in a car park lot, and she told us about boys and sex and stuff. And this conversation happened, and it was because my mum felt she needed to do that, because she's bringing up 3 daughters as well as a son. And she's a divorcee, and she needs to have these conversations to have this trust with her daughters. So back then, she did the best she could do. And I'll be honest with you, I respect her for thinking outside the box, considering being, you know, a parent of that generation, and wanting to have the confidence to bring that conversation up with us. But then past that, and I do remember that conversation not being where openly talking about sex. It was very much, don't go near boys. It was very much, don't go near boys, and remember your relationship with your mum is so much more important than a boy. Your education is so much important. So I think, you know, again, like if they had that conversation, if you were to get intimate, you know, to think about safe sex, and then, you know, there's a possibility you could fall pregnant as well. And if the conversation was probably led a bit differently, and everybody did the best they could, so I'm not faulting anybody. And the fact, I know out of my group of friends, we got the sex talk, as much as it was awkward, it was different, but we got it in some form. A lot of people didn't even get that from my generation. So
I think as well, the boys need to be educated as well. You know, like is it Michelle Obama that says we bring up our boys but we raise our girls? You know, and it's
we're always protecting our women in the South Asian community, always putting, even if you look at the rape cases in India, we're preventing girls from going out, but yet we're not giving the education. Education starts with both genders, not just one. And it's so important to sit the boys down as well as sit the girls down. So like with Team Sharon,
boys, how, you know, for example, dating, how you treat a woman on a date, you know, how you treat a girl on a date, you know, how to be respectful, how to, you know, how to sit back. And you know, holding a door out for somebody, you know, it's all important. You know, they need just as much education how to treat a woman than the girl also needs education on how she should be treated.
And I think that's something, because you got to remember, from my generation, I remember in our generation, she was saying, parents have always said to you to keep away from boys. So all your life, it's all about education, stay away from boys. So when you get to 25, they're like, have you got a boyfriend? I remember when I went home and I finished uni, she was like, have you got a boyfriend? I'm like, how you expect me to miraculously just now have one there? When I did a fashion degree as well, they were either gay or, you know, bisexual. And I had those open conversations with my mum about people's sexuality, which was a good, healthy thing for a South Asian parent. And, you know, so she knew that. And I goes, Mum, and now you're expecting me to miraculously at 25 have a chap there ready to get married? Like all our life you've just embedded to stay away from boys, and now you're expecting me to just,
and you've worked so hard as well on your education, you know, why wouldn't you follow through with that?
So then I found, well, I was very lucky, actually, I gotta say. I lived abroad and I ended up getting a job with my degree. So and even when I got married, I had a job with my degree. So I was doing everything I was meant to be doing. But it's just where I feel magically they expect you to appear with someone, where if they'd had those conversations openly, which I know in our generation now we are doing with our kids, where having open conversations, talking about dating, and like you said, it's getting your children to have the expectation of how a woman should be treated, how a guy should be treated. Like I've got a friend who's got a boy and a girl. She's now giving her some pocket money. And then what he does is he takes mummy and sister out on a date.
Love that.
So he knows he's paying for dinner, or he's paying for the coffee, he's going to get the door, he's going to do these certain things. And I think that's such a beautiful element as parents, because also it's making the sister realize how to be treated even by a brother. And it starts at home. It starts at home amongst siblings. And if we treating
how the parent
parent
treats his wife, or the mother of his children, how he treats it's honestly, I've had this conversation with my partner. It's really important. Like,
How the
for
kids see your
example,
parents. Yep.
crossing the road, make sure we're with, it's the silly
Yeah.
thing. Make sure he makes sure we're with him. Are you both okay? Okay, let's all, little things like that.
Holding hands, little thing,
Yeah.
showing affection. It really is down to the basic little things. And this is where, like, I'll be honest, like, I've gone into schools, part of Team Sharon, right? And we go into schools and we'll ask girls, and we'll have like sessions with the girls and the boys. And with the girls, I've done where, what is love? And the first thing the girls say, I haven't got a boyfriend. But when did I say anything about a boy? All I've asked is, what is love? And love can be a number of things. It can be where, how, like, I love the way my mum puts oil in my hair.
Mm.
I love when my mum cooks my favorite dish when I go home to visit. These are things I love my mum does for me. I love spending time with my nephews and nieces, my friends, and going out for coffee and going to the gym. It's
Yeah.
things we love doing. So why is love always measured with the opposite sex?
Yeah.
Naturally, for kids at that age. And I think when we go into schools and we do these talks and we see kids and we use a word and what they think of that word, and you'll be like, well, hang on, why do we put a twist on it? And then when I share my journey, I say, well, actually, to me, love is when my mum puts Indian oil in my head and gives me an Indian head massage. For me, it's where I sit with my nan and have quality time, listening to all her stories about her journey of her life and the life she's
Love
lived.
is kindness. Love is
Exactly. And there's so many things that love is, and that's how we get then kids to write the positiveness of love and the negativeness of love, like the negative feelings.
What do we expect when we look at media outlets, film, dramas, um, um, songs that they listen to, and they watch the music videos and stuff? It's
I think the Western stuff shows a lot more of like partnership, but in the South Asian community with the Indian films, growing up as an Asian in the 80s, I did find it was very much male dominated, and how patriarchy overall is where men are in control. And for me, growing up, I saw that. And then also having a father who was an alcoholic and abuse, domestic violence my parents went through, and being a child of a domestic violence, I never saw love and affection at home as well. So that's a massive thing. And this is where I'm saying, where you're with a partner, you're sitting there, you're showing affection. It doesn't have to be over the top, but just even, bringing each other's dinner in, showing that love and affection and act of service in a different way. That's something our parents didn't do because our mothers were so
how was your
busy
day
bringing.
today? Never got
Yeah,
that.
never. So my mum was the one working as a machinist, putting the food on the table. My dad was the one that would go to work, then go to the pub. There was those gender roles, which was the immigrant community, the way they lived. They never openly communicate their struggles, and men had their fair share of struggles as well. The pressure of bringing up their families and stuff. So I think looking at that generation to the next generation, which I've seen in my generation, where with my siblings and friends, the way they're bringing up their kids and everything, I've seen that interaction and that complete transformation.
Yeah.
And even talking, I mean, I wouldn't say I've not heard any of my friends yet at a very young age talk to the kids about the opposite sex, but you've had the kids make the odd comment where I can't wait to have a boyfriend one day, or things like that. And I've seen the reaction of the parents has not been anything like what our parents' reaction would have been. And it's part of life, and you have to have these conversations at some point. But it's just understanding when is the safe time to have those conversations, but having them in such a appropriate and educational manner, which is so important.
Yeah. I want to quickly go back a little bit, because it's amazing what you're doing now, what you're currently doing, and how much love and dedication that you've got to all the roles that you're working in. But I have a question. Can you tell me who the woman Kalbir Bains was before you got married? I want to know. I do.
Okay, I was the good Indian girl.
Right.
The perfect good Indian girl. I think because mum and dad had gone through a divorce, mum was under a lot of pressure from family and community for us girls to succeed. So there was 3 of us sisters and then my brother. And when my parents divorced, my brother was 3 years old. We were 9 at the time. And then obviously watching the abuse over the years, they didn't officially divorce until they separated in around about, it was 1980.
Mm.
1994 was officially, or 95, their divorce officially went through. Through those 5 years, we saw a lot of abuse going on, them fighting between us, kids in court, all sorts go on. And I don't mean when I say, I mean, if you read in my book, the story of the inside of my parents chapter, I've only written one chapter in there, and people have said, God, that's quite heavy. That's the light journey of what my mum went through. There's so much what my mum went through. We'd go to weddings, as long as she'd have bruises on her arm, she'd cover herself up. Anybody ask us, where's your dad? And my mum would get us to kind of like just say he's at work. We always made him out to be this busy, caring, this strong male figure who protected us, when really he was doing the opposite.
Yeah.
And and we put this front up in front of the community. So again, we led a double life growing up. We're hiding our feelings. And then when I got to uni, so I was a bit of a rebel. I did put my mum through a lot of hell as a child, and I played up because I didn't want her to go through a divorce with my dad, because I felt the shame as a child that, what are people going to say that we're from a divorced family? So we hid it. None of my school friends knew until
right?
Me and my twin were the oldest, so we're 11 minutes apart. And the pressure that was on us two girls as well, that the younger two are going to follow you two. So you have to be almost perfect for them to follow the lead. And literally what we did was, I found where, for me in particular, I'd gone from this rebel to then transforming into being this good child. And I was a rebel all the way through uni, and then when I got to college as well, she wanted me to study business. I was like, there's no way, I can't do the whole Indian business thing, it's just not me. And I loved art. I had a passion for art, poetry, writing. I did, but I was dyslexic and I was struggling with that. And then I ended up following my passion, and I love fashion. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to be a fashion designer. And I've got to say, I ended up getting a degree in fashion. I've traveled the world. I've done a lot like abroad, as well as like in the UK. And I ended up, when I was married, I was working for Marks and Spencer supply base.
Right.
So I was a designer for all of T11 shirts, which are all your formal wear at M&S, where you got your autograph collezione range. That in the Easy Care, they were the area I was a designer. And again, I did everything by the tick box. I ended up trying to just please family, like not please family, please my mum, because I knew she'd gone through a hard time. And again, not trying to get into relationships, not trying to do this, not trying to do that, and trying to be this whole good Indian girl. And then I didn't realize that doing everything by the book. And then one day when I was 26, I had a cerebral bypass surgery, which is basically, I had an extra bone on my left. You probably can see that there's a bit of a scar. My left side, I had an extra bone in my neck, which, as a party trick at uni, I used to press on it and go, look at what I can do. And then all of a sudden one day it's clicked back on itself, stopping all my blood supply to my left side of my body.
Wow.
And in a matter of 3 months, it deteriorated to the point I lost full movement in this arm, and went into surgery overnight, an emergency. And I woke up weeks later in intensive care, and I nearly died for this surgery. But I lost in the process full movement in my left arm, bit in my lower leg. And I had to retrain myself how to walk and, to function on my left side of my body. And I remember my self-esteem got knocked back then. And I was always a confident child. I always knew what I wanted to do and put my mind through it. Always had a mind of my own. Never cared about pleasing people other than my mum. The one person I really cared about, I wanted to just please. And I remember when I got my degree, how happy and proud she was. I remember when I got my job, because for her, it was a big thing, that whole South Asian community, people get degrees, but they never get a job in their degree. When I got a job in my degree, she boasted about it to everyone, And I remember I was in a relationship and I told her about it, introduced him, brought him home. But me having this surgery, it basically changed the dynamic of that relationship. And then I ended up ending the relationship because I've lost full movement in my arm, and not knowing at the time if I'm going to gain that movement back, which had a massive knock on my self-esteem. And I went completely closed off, completely stopped sharing things with everyone, really got so negative. Like I just didn't want to hang out with people. I'd lost loads of weight, and I was always a bigger girl at uni as well, really big girl, and like a size 14, not really big, but size 14. And all of a sudden lost all confidence. So I just started to gain a bit of confidence. So when I got my job, and my mum was like, I'd love you to meet someone, let's go through the arranged marriage process. And when I did it, I did everything by the book. And by
Yeah.
doing everything by the book, do you know, once I got divorced, Sharon, the way the community and family treated me,
Yeah.
it gave me a taste of what my mum went through in the 90s. And yet we're in an educated generation right now. And why are people behaving like this? Was my whole issue. And also when I went back on the dating scene and the way I saw, like, I'll give you an example. There was a guy, he dropped me a message when I was back on the dating scene. This is the first person, and this is weird. So he's seen my profile, and I've written a good long profile because I thought, I want to know if this person's paying attention. So he's read, so I'm assuming he's read my profile. So the first thing I ask, he says, can I get you? So we've got, this is just through email, not even phone number. Can I get your phone number? And I said, well, hang on, have you read my profile? Because I clearly said I'm divorced, and some people don't read. And he's gone, yeah, I have. And then all of a sudden, we're having a conversation. He goes, what are you doing to the conversation? Just going smooth and lightly and whatever. All of a sudden, he's gone and checked out my profile. In between those 20 minutes of introducing himself, he's read my profile and he's gone, actually, are you a divorcee? I went, yeah. Have you read the profile now? And he went, yes. I don't think you're going to fit in with my family because my parents don't want a divorcee. And I was like, where does that come into fitting in with your parents? How about it being about you and fitting in with you? Yeah. And I was like, are you kidding me? Within 20 minutes, then he went, I'm a public figure and I can't be with a divorcee and be seen with a divorcee as a public figure. And within 20 minutes, this conversation, and I've got it in my old phone still saved. It was just phenomenal the way this person did this. And I literally was like, wish you all the best, and just ended it. And for me, it was like, there you go, it validates it. And the way people are behaving on dating sites and things like that, I saw. So as a research on the book, starting the research of the book, what I did was I'd put, my friend Caroline we all went on this shadi.com and those other websites are single. We then changed our status after 3 months. We stimulated conversation with a load of people, load of guys, and she changed her status to a widow. And all of a sudden her inbox starts getting flooded with, oh my God, poor me, sympathy, compassion emails, and them trying to reach out to her in almost like a slightly manipulative way of trying to get to her in emotionally. Then I changed my status to a divorcee. I went from 22 people down to 3 left.
My goodness.
2 were other writers, and one was genuine, and I actually met him up for a coffee. And the other 2, I know they were writers, but I shouldn't have assumed that they were writing. So I cut one up, and I remember the other one told me he was writing for The Guardian for some love soul, and I couldn't stop laughing. Then he was, again, weird enough, we found out we went to the same secondary school, but he was a couple of years older than me. So, no, which is fine. We met up for a coffee and had a good crack about things. And then the other guy, there was genuine one. There was only one guy that was genuine. And I met him up and I said, why would you want to date a divorcee? And he said, well, I've had a live-in 7-year relationship with a girl. Nobody knows about it. There's no difference between you and I. Oh. So you know, and I think and I think it also teaches you it's not to do with a particular group of people. It's down to your life experience. It's the person you are down to your life experience. If you know you've lived with someone before marriage, you know you've had a living relationship and your parents don't know anything, but you have your own personality, you have your own identity, you have a mind of your own. And you know, that mind only expands by having a diverse group of friends, traveling a lot, having people from all walks of life that you respect and appreciate those people for who they are, you know. And that's what was my learning from that process. And the ones that were there to please their parents on matrimony sites completely lost interest straight away. Yeah. So I was the people-pleasing little good Indian girl.
But listening to you, you know, like listening about your childhood, you know, and when I said to you, you know, who was the woman before your marriage, I just automatically, I straight away think the emotional, the psychological impact, you know, like, and I think this is where we connect, because I understand your position as a child, you know, to giving off this sort of persona of how your family dynamic and how it's all roses and, you know, there's no problems, and, you know, sort of in some way you were protecting your mum as much as she was actually trying to protect you girls as well. But the emotional and the psychological impacts of lying to your family sort of being brought up and grown up to learn how to lie and to learn how to hide
almost
things.
making, yeah, and making, do you know what? And that's where the struggle started again.
Yeah,
I didn't realize by going from not having to live that life from 16
yeah.
to the age of when I got married, 27. And then soon in my marriage, problems started. And again, I was living that life again. And I remember saying
The repeating
to my,
history of what your mum.
I was. And do you know what? I remember saying to my ex and mother-in-law, I said, I wouldn't have got married if I had to live a double life. My mum went through this and I'm having to go through this again now. And you know what? So the 10 years from the age of 16 to the age of 27, those 11 years were the best years of my life. And again, this last decade has been the best year of my life because I've been true to myself and I'm open and I talk about everything openly with everyone. I tell everyone who I am if they ask me that question, and may they like it or not, but this is the real me.
Yeah,
And whereas though the genuine, authentic me, whereas though when everyone was married, again, I was put in this front, going to weddings, functions, showing everyone in the family I'm okay, when really deep down, I was hurting.
yeah,
I went through abortion 2 months after marriage. I hid that abortion pain from everyone. I was going through depression and I was hiding it. No one knew I was going through depression. The only person that clocked on was my mom. Because every time I came home, I got married at 12 stone. I was 6.5 stones when I came home after separating from my marriage.
oh my
And
God.
it's taken me years to put weight on.
Yeah,
So, you know, the person they gave away as a daughter to the person they received back when I came back after 19 months of marriage and the abuse I went through in that marriage, only I know what happened behind closed doors. And it's very easy for someone to judge you. And it's taken me 12 years to heal, where
yeah,
today I can talk about everything without breaking down. I understand the patterns. I went through severe counseling. You know, I went through counseling at the beginning, even whilst I was still married. We went through marriage counseling, we went through mediation with the families. You know, I've done a number of things. I didn't just get up and walk out of a marriage. And this is what I didn't like, the community assuming I got up and walked out.
yeah,
People assuming I must have not worked at my marriage. And, you know, again, no one saw what my mother did for years to work at her marriage. For 14 years, she put up with abuse from my father, and nobody knew what was going on behind closed doors. And again, I'd put up with so much, even after. So I separated in 2009. We went up to mediation up until 2011. End of 2010, we were still going through mediation. And in 2011 was where it was stopped. I was like, right, I'm moving on with my life. I can't do this anymore. And then 2012 is where officially we got divorced. And then after that, I went into taking another year or so to heal, to then go into a relationship after that. And it takes time.
yeah.
You can't just jump into things because it takes time to heal. And then I think because I've taken time to heal and reflect on my behaviors, reflect what I can do differently, touch wood, I've been in such a blessed journey that I've met some amazing people that I've dated over the years that have contributed to the person I am today. And I am grateful to those men, because they are part of my journey. And, you know, regardless of who they are, what background they're from, or again, they look at me as a human, I look at them as human. And if you can accept me for who I really am and just love me for the person I am, that goes a long way. And no one can be in denial that if you know who I am the author of this book. I am a survivor of all the topics I've talked about. May you choose to accept that part of me or not, but that is part of my journey.
I think that's what makes you stronger as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
Accepting yourself, and I think loving yourself is so important. That's one thing we do not teach girls in our community, you know. And even though you've been through everything, we're proud of you, you know.
yeah,
It's okay. And you know, last year, like, we had a family wedding and my uncle went out there, my mama G did, my older one from Canada, and he stood there and apparently he gave a huge talk to the whole family and telling everyone how proud he is of me. That I remember he was one of the people that said to me when I'd ended my marriage, right? And and I'm going to use this, he refers to all the girls in our house as but meaning son.
yeah,
He only has 2 daughters himself, right? My uncle's never looked at any of us as we're less of a human being than a boy. So he turned and said to me, he goes, look, but what are you going to do? I want you to not live under your mum's roof. I need you to move out, stand on your 2 feet. I need you to prove to everyone that you're okay and you're going to do it. And you're going to stand on the day you stand on your 2 feet is the day you've made it in life. And you know, I made a conscious decision to move out from my mum's house because I'd only moved in for about, I think it was just under a year. I stayed there and then I moved out. I've been on my own 2 feet. I've achieved what I've done all by myself. And I can today sit here and say, you know what? This is my hard work. the struggles have been my hard work as well. That journey has been my journey, and I'm proud of it.
Yeah.
So I have no one to kind of to say that, oh, they did this for me, or they did. Yes, I had 5 members of family that were there to support me. And
Yeah.
again, this is where my question comes. We have 550 guests at our weddings, but when our relationships and our lives fall apart, how many of those people are going to stand next to you? I had 5.
That's
5 solid people. So it's something to think about. And I think, you know, for girls, we need to really, really build up their self-esteem and confidence. For boys, we need to bring in the education and self-esteem. And remember, they have different challenges and different tackles. But I think it comes down to education from a young age. Like, I'll use this one friend, like I told you, who gives her son pocket money and a daughter. And then the pocket money is given to them to say, like, you're going to take us out today for a coffee. And then he goes and we pick the coffee, we select it, he goes and pays for it, he opens the doors. It's teaching. All of these habits come from your front door, from your parents, observing your parents, as well as, yes, schools, but don't throw the responsibility at school. Take the responsibility of what you have at home. Now, when I reflected back on my journey,
what you say at home, how you act,
how you speak, everything matters. Language, body language, how you behave, how much you interact, and really put your phones down and actually spend quality time with your
around
kids.
the table, having dinner around the table.
Little things like that make a massive, massive difference. And you know, even if you're, as a family, you're all in your individual rooms, but have dinner time as that one time where it's those 30 to 40 minutes, even an hour, if you can push it to an hour, where everyone switches off their technology and sits and has dinner together. That'll be one thing you can achieve, and through that you can find out what your kids are. You've got to have communication is key to everything,
especially when we're on our devices a lot, you know.
A
lot of social media, you know, it's brought jobs in, you know. So I'm not saying devices are, you know, are wrong, but I think there are times where it's unnecessary to have them, as you say, around the dinner.
And also you've got to remember, right now, even if you look at like sexual trafficking happening, paedophile through social media, you know, as parents, knowing what your child is being exposed to, you need to be monitoring these devices. You know, it's just safeguarding. And I think this is a thing which we never got brought up with, you know, giving space and limits within the safeguarding procedures. I'm not saying make it into a policy whole process, but keep it fun, but keep it with imbalance of things, so that, you know, like I've got nieces and nephews that have got phones and iPads. Check in them, monitor that they're using it in the age appropriate, check in that what they're on, how long are they on for, because obviously mental health is another issue that's at the moment with COVID and the pandemic has risen around the world. So, and again, kids are having to use these devices to do their schoolwork. So, okay, how are you guys monitoring it that it's healthy for them? You know, so, and again, like with my mom now, like her challenge has been at times when she's had my nephews and nieces around and they've had communication with their parents on the iPad. She doesn't even know when they're sitting next to her, they're communicating with their parents. So if they're doing, that's why I've turned around and said to her, if you can take the devices off of them and have interaction conversations with them, do things that interact so that you know what they're doing. Because if you can't monitor that device, you don't know who's reaching out to them. And they could be sitting right next to you.
Absolutely.
Especially the older generation as well, if they're not educated, they will struggle with things like that, to think in that kind of mind. And I think this is the best thing about our generation and the younger generation, hopefully, where we're bringing that change about, but we've got to think about the safe way to bring that change around, with education, with a balance, with, you know, kind of understanding every pros and cons of the situation before you just give it out there. And I think that's really important. That's something I've learned as an auntie to all my friends' kids as well, like conversation. Like, I can use an example. I went to see a friend last week, and she's got a teenager with 2 little ones. So I spent the time with the little ones playing earlier. Then it was like I wanted to have time with the family. So I had a sit down dinner with the girls, and then I promised them I'll do a TikTok video at the end with them, which was what the teenager wanted. So you've got to fit into every element of a box, especially in a family unit. If you've got a big family where you've got all age groups, you know, that there's a point where I sat and I had an hour and a half where we closed the door, got the kids out to have a mature conversation about stuff we're all doing, which we didn't want the kids to hear. And I think that's another thing. When we were growing up, they just didn't talk. they thought by not talking about anything, we're protecting them. But we chose to have those conversations last week, which was my friend, her mom, her mother-in-law. Us four women went into a room, told the kids we're going to have a cup of coffee and a chit chat for an hour, and we'll get back to you guys in a bit. So we had those mature conversations in the closed door. Then we also had that quality time with the family and certain conversations you could have. But because you got to look at things that are age appropriate as well. You know, the conversation we were having at the time wasn't age appropriate for the kids. So it wasn't us protecting them or doing what we did when we were growing up, but it's managing it differently, and it's understanding how are you going to manage all these, you know, communications, best way to talk to them and find a solution to a problem, I think.
I think so. And I think as well, something that popped into like my mind, it's also the misconception of information as well. So,
Yeah.
you know, you're talking about devices there, however they're fun, you know, there's something to connect to people. But also like the things that you were talking about, like abortion and stuff, domestic violence, you know, it's all in the same sort of group. I think it's really important to discuss the misconceptions that we have, like for example, of abortion as well. Like a lot of people don't realize that although it is legal to have an abortion, it still needs to be signed off by 2 medical practitioners.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know that.
When I went through my...
refuse.
Yeah, I'm going to share my journey because I have shared it on, I did the BBC Abortion on Trial with Anne Robinson.
Yeah.
And I was married when I went through my abortion. So I remember going into my GP, and my GP experience, I remember when I shared it with everybody, a lot of people were quite shocked. So when I went in, first of all, he was there, like, because I went in and I did the test at home and I realized I'm pregnant. So he did the test the week before. So on the Monday morning when I got there, he goes, "We've got your results, you're pregnant, miss." My married name, he said at the time. And I said, "Right." I goes, "Well," and he goes, and straight away I was like, "I know I'm pregnant. I did the test. My partner doesn't want the child." And he was like, "What?" But he goes, "Where?" Like, he was confused, and he was like, "Explain why." Because you're married,
yeah,
you're okay financially, you've got a great job, and you know, both of you have got,
it is a hard concept to get people's head around. It really is.
And do you know, that's another thing I think I want to just say as well whilst we're talking. And I find this, you know, growing up, Sharon, I saw when you see a TV, may this be in a Bollywood film, may this be in any other film on TV, when you see a pregnancy test and it has that blue line across it, and you see the woman like excited to share the news with her partner, and then the partner gets excited. We've grown up with this notion where that's what's expected. And I'm going to be honest, when even though I was married, I saw that line seep across, I actually sunk, my heart sunk, because it wasn't the right time. At the time, I thought, the first thing that came to my mind was, I'm not going to lie, was like, shite, we've just got married and we'd had a 5-year plan to have kids further 5 years down the line. What the hell, this is throwing me off. It's not part of my plan. So I literally got scared as hell, to the point where I was like, it took me a few hours to sink it in. And then I was like, actually, I'm okay. I do want this baby. But it took a couple of hours. And my first initial reaction was, I just felt the ground's just opened up and somebody just take me in, and I'm just don't know what I'm going to do right now. That's how I felt. And I was also scared to tell my partner. And I think, so I've been growing up watching all these scenes. So I had that.
Did you have an idea of how he was going to react?
No, because I knew that he was excited, because we talked about having kids in the future. And I always told him how I was going to tell him. And I always said that I would tell him in the presence of Guruji, Guru Granth Sahib Ji, in the Gurdwara. And it was weird because then on that day, so I've grown up in a Punjabi household. On my birthday, one thing my mum really expects you to do is, now where you are, even if you're abroad, I just expect you to go to a Gurdwara and do Matha Tek. So we were going to the Gurdwara just before we were going out for dinner, and I went and got up and sat next to him from my side to his side, and I said his name, and I just turned to him, which in the book is called Mahinda. I turned to him and I said, "I'm pregnant," and he just got up and left.
Wow.
And what do you do with that? What do you do with that? Because we've grown up watching, I'm pregnant, and the other person gets excited. And I had silent treatment for the rest of the evening.
God.
We not said 2 words all evening, and we went for a 3-course meal. We sat through the whole meal the point I decided I didn't even want dessert because I couldn't sit through the silence anymore.
Initiating conversation, he just would not.
I no, do you know what? Anything I was saying, and then I was so nervous. I was so scared inside myself. And at the time, you're thinking, what have I done wrong? What's wrong? Like, I don't get it. And even in my head, I thought at the time, well, all right, it's early. We've got married. It's okay, but I'm pregnant. I want to have this child. Eventually, like, it sunk into me that I do want the child when I really calm my nerves down. But for him, it was no, not having it, not having it. And the way he did it was so cheap, where we'd rolled the car into a car park and sat on a bench, and he said, no, literally no, you're not going to have this child, you're getting rid of it. And it's not even up for discussion. It's not even up for discussion. And it's your mess and you're going to sort it out.
That sends me into a frenzy of emotion.
So I'd gone through all of that, and it was, you know what, it was really difficult. I can't explain it to you, that I didn't know, I had no support at all. And then the other thing, the next day, my ex-in-laws had thrown a birthday party for me. So it was, I actually discovered on my birthday, it was my that I was pregnant 12 years ago. So I've not celebrated my birthday for the last 12 years, I'm going to be honest. And this year I've turned 40. For the first time, I spent my birthday amongst family. 9 people that I cared about were in a room with me, and even that, I didn't feel overwhelmed or anything. The last time I celebrated my birthday when I was 28, around my whole family being at my ex-in-law's house, and I was nervous about those feelings come to the surface. And to be honest, everybody was great and understanding. The 9 people I had in the room, I was happy to have just those 9 people, and I didn't need any more. It would have been overwhelming for me, because I'm not the kind of person to have that attention. Every year I've booked a flight, I've disappeared on holiday by myself, I've enjoyed it, and I've treated it as a normal day. And I really thought I'm going to get certain emotions come to the surface, but they didn't. And it was such a lovely day. And it was thanks to those 9 people that made my birthday this year. And again, you know, if you think about it, it takes time. And then I always, every year I used to remember, especially earlier on, my birthday, because my mum's never known if she should wish me happy birthday or she shouldn't, because I used to first break down every year crying. So anyway, going back to the doctor, what happened with the doctor, he turned around and he said, why would you want an abortion? So I said to him that I can't have the child, I need to go through the abortion process. He goes, but why would you want an abortion? He goes, financially you're okay, you're married, what's your reason? And he goes, and then he just turned around. I think now looking back on it, I'm grateful for the way he spoke to me, but at the time I wasn't, I'm not going to lie. I was really disappointed and I was annoyed at my doctor. He turned around and he said to me, I don't care about anyone outside in that room. Right now, you're my patient in my room and you're a priority to me. I've taken an oath to bring life into this world, not end life. And I'm not going to help you end this life.
Wow.
So he'd said to me that, you know, everybody outside can wait, but you're a priority to me. And then he went into talking about how he's a father of 6 and how the joy he's had. And again, that whole emotional pressure from a GP was just too much at the time. And I remember all I was thinking was, and I was on edge and really like irrational to the point where just give me what I need. This is what he's asked me. I would love, then I ended up breaking down to him saying, I want the child, but my husband doesn't want it. What do you expect me to do? And then he turned around and he said to me, he goes, well, you've got to go through with this. And the pressure was so much. And he was like, he refused to sign me off as a GP, to the point he gave me a leaflet and said, if you want an abortion, you're going to have to call this clinic. And it's bad enough as a woman going in that circumstance.
He was trying to help you in some way.
I think because he knew I wanted it, and I had cried in his office, in his surgery. And I think he thought if he could talk to me and get to my emotional side, that he'll get through to me, which he did. I'm not going to lie. I came out of the surgery broken, crying my eyes out. And the only person that knew at the time I was pregnant was my best friend. And this best friend of mine rang me up. And when I told her, and I was outside the second clinic where I was going in to plan the abortion, and I rang her and I told her, and she begged me not to go through with it. And I thought, I wish I'd got this reaction from my partner. And I hadn't. And she'd begged me to tell him how I'm feeling. And I said, there's no point. Because of that, I just made a decision that, do you know what? I'm going to have to go through with this. Because he'd also stopped talking to me. There was no communication. Then he was like, I'm not going to have any communication with you until you sort this mess out. And it was almost very much, well, it's your mess, not mine. but it takes two of us to get pregnant.
Of course it does.
So it's just, I just can't explain the experience I had. Was very much, again, I don't know if it's something in the South Asian community or it was a fear in a man or what, where it's very much, it's your problem, you deal with it and get back to me once it's sorted, and I'm not going to help you with the process. So I had no support, and I
alone.
completely alone. I couldn't tell my family, and that was another thing. The day after on my birthday, when the family had turned up to the house, I was getting ready. I couldn't fit into any of my Indian clothes because they didn't fit me. My ex-sister-in-law walked into my room, and she was really excited, and I really loved my ex-sister-in-law. We were like besties, and she was like, let me help you get ready. And at that one point I went to tell her, he's walked in and he's got rid of her out the room, and straight away he's come up to me in the room and he's giving me a little mini threat where, you're not going to open your mouth to anyone to say you're pregnant, not your family or my side of the family, until you've got rid of it, and you're not even going to talk then about it, and that's it. And because I went through all of that, I felt I was living my mum's life again. Again, the families turned up to our house for my birthday to celebrate me. Deep down, they didn't even know I'm putting a smile on, and I'm pregnant. And for me, my 28th birthday was living my mum's life again. But this time, I'm not watching my mum live it. I'm in her shoes.
Yeah.
And for me, it was the most killing process of my soul. That's all I can say. From that day on, up until 19 months of my marriage ending, it just, every day there was a piece of me being taken. Every time I went to a family function, a wedding, I put this front, I'm okay. There was just no one noticed other than the weight loss I had. And the weight loss was the only sign that gave it away. I put on this massive smile on my face. I'm doing great. I'm okay. You know, I'm married to this gorgeous guy who's got a great family, putting this front up in the community, going to the Gurdwara every Sunday, doing it all. I wasn't happy. Inside, I was not happy.
And I bet as well that you are actually really good at putting that public persona on, because you've done it for your mum, you know, because you've actually been conditioned to do that. You've actually been taught how well to do it.
Yeah. But you know, the saddest part was the amount of times I did break down, and I'd break down because we had an ensuite bedroom, and I'd break down in my ensuite, and I'd close the door and I'd cry in the bathroom without any noise, so he couldn't hear me outside. And I think for me was, when going through the process of abortion, how naive I was, where there's not enough information out there. Not enough information out there for women. This is where I was really disappointed, and this is why I wanted to talk about it. So when I went through the process, I went through the natural process, so I didn't have the operation. So you have two options when you go through an abortion. So first of all, your two GPs need to sign you off.
Yeah.
My GP refused me. I had to go to another clinic, which was in West Bromwich. From there, I had to get two GPs to sign me off to say they approve of me having an abortion. They signed me off, and then I had to go, and then the process started. So then I go and book it in. So I found out on my birthday I was pregnant. I'd gone to the doctors on the 2nd, I think it was, of June, and it's been booked in for, by the time I've rang the second clinic, within days. I was very lucky. I actually got it booked in on the 9th of June. Not very lucky really, but on the 9th of June. It was done so quickly because he wanted it done so quickly. I didn't get time to process anything. The worst thing I think I could have had was I had to, so also we had to do it not in my local town. I had to do it in another local town because of the shame. And again, think about how many girls go through an abortion if they're not married, or they are married, the shame of not being seen in an abortion clinic. They'll go to another one, to the next town, and or if there isn't one available into their local, they're having to go to another town because they want the abortion so quickly. So you're putting yourself at further risks with that. Then also, when I got there, they wanted to do a scan to see if I could have the natural process, which is they give you 2 pills. So the option is where they give you 1 pill you put and swallow in your mouth, and you go away for 4 hours, and you come back, and the second pill they'll put in your vagina. But now the process has changed, where they'll give you both pills in your mouth, and you don't actually swallow them, but you keep them in your gums. And then that basically gets in your bloodstream quicker, and starts the abortion process. But again, there was no leaflets to tell you how it's going to start if you're going to go through the natural process. So me thinking I'm going to take the natural process, I won't have the operation because it'll be good for me, even though abortion isn't good for you for a start. That's another thing. People have this thing where they don't realize you're putting yourself at a higher risk of going through having breast cancer every time you have an abortion. You're increasing your risk of having breast cancer. So I'd gone through it thinking I'm doing the natural process, naive and no leaflets to read up on this either. I'd started the process and I left the clinic in the car. I'd say about 30 to 40 minutes my process started. You end up having through the natural process is like labor pain. And I'd actually started the bleeding in the car on the way home. And to the point I couldn't even walk by the time I got to my front door. I'd eventually got in and I just basically took painkillers, and they'd advise you to drink a lot of orange juice for vitamin C because you're going to be running low on that. And I literally got a pint of juice. I remember just taking loads of, I took, oh, this is going to sound really bad, sleeping pills as well as painkillers together to numb the pain to help me sleep through it. To the point I woke up in the middle of the night by him. I was woken up by him in the bed, and we were both swimming in the blood from me, and just soaked him. And literally, because I'd taken so many tablets, I was just zonked out. I'd got up, and I think this is what threw me off. There was no compassion or emotion towards me at all, where it was very much where you need to get up, you need to clear this mess up. It's your mess again. Yeah. And I had to get up at 3 a.m, strip the bed sheets, put new sheets on, sort myself out. And at this process, all I've got is heavy bleeding. And again, they don't tell you this in a leaflet. They don't give you this detail in a leaflet.
So and then actually give birth.
Yeah, it is giving birth. Yeah. It's delivering. And the thing that people that don't, judge you on saying you've had an abortion. So think about all those women that are having a miscarriage. It's the same thing. We're happy to celebrate when someone's getting pregnant, but we won't even talk about miscarriages. We won't even know how to word or what to say to that person. It's the same process what I went through. And again, they didn't tell you this, but I delivered the child next morning. When I'm in the shower, I saw the fetus between my legs. And that's something they don't tell you in any leaflet that you're going to see.
It's strange because you can slightly understand because it's such a horrific experience, but your expectations need to be managed.
Yeah.
You need to know what's going on. You need to understand.
And this is where, for me, like talking about abortion isn't just talking about it. I wanted to go air onto that program because of wanting people to know the reality of it, because there was myself and there was what was her name? I think it was Alex. I think it was Alex, the other girl. She started her abortion on a bus. And then she had to go into a public toilet where she saw the fetus. So her process had happened on a public transport and in the public toilets. So mine was in a car journey and then in the comfort of my bathroom. But this is the information that women aren't given. And you can also bleed to death. This is the information women aren't given. And I think if we have this information for women, they'll make informed decisions, knowing which, if I knew this, I would have gone through the operation process. Do you see what I mean? And that's what my journey has taught me, that I don't want any woman to go through what I've been through. So this is why I want to raise the education around it and say, okay, what information have we got? Where is the information missing? What can we do to add that information with the health workers? What can we do with, okay, it wasn't just going onto Abortion on Trial documentary. It was lobbying House of Parliament to change that bill after 50 years. Canada had brought the abortion bill in after us. They'd reviewed the bill twice after us. Our bill came in the early 60s, has never been reviewed since, I think it was 1967, and it hadn't been reviewed since it's important, because every community looks at abortion as a taboo, huge subject in their community and within their own community. So no MP wanted to touch that bill. And eventually, where they bought in for all of Glasgow and England, where you can now take the second pill in the comfort of your own home. After me and Alex, or it was Alexa, that shared our experience of having an abortion in the process of going home. And then I got them to really think about, when I was sharing my experience from the South Asian community, look at the women, the pressures we're under. And also, if we look at how many Punjab, how many girls have been aborted overall in Punjab. I know you're probably not aware of this, but this is before the pandemic. Last year I went to Canada to see my nan, and obviously my nanny has the Indian channels on, and we had this conversation. I've got like a recording of me and my nan having this conversation because I asked if I could record our conversation at the time, where not one girl had been born in Punjab for 3 months in the whole of district of Punjab. How is that possible if they're not aborting them? But
And
we're not going to take responsibility. We don't want to.
This is another thing when we talk about abortion, because, you know, when I was sort of writing my posts on abortion, it's so common. You know, if something is so common and requires healthcare, why aren't people talking about it?
Yeah. And not just that, today, another thing that threw me off, one of my learning lessons from this documentary was, I went in there again with what information, life experience I've had. So, you know, I never I have a cousin who has Down syndrome. So I have got cousins that have like autistics and Down syndrome and things like that. And I never thought I would ever be a parent of a disability child. So I've gone in there not knowing that. And my learning lesson from that documentary, at the end of the week, they asked each of us what we learned. Claire, who was a mum to a Down syndrome child, Theo, they brought onto the documentary, which they edited out. Obviously, everybody couldn't see that, but we all got to meet Theo. Claire eventually opened up her journey and said that she found out after years that she's carrying a disabled child. Now, when you're carrying a disabled child, a mother has up to the final week of giving birth to terminate that pregnancy.
Oh my goodness.
And the doctor does. The mother and doctor have more rights over that child than what the father does. And that for me was the most learning lesson in that week, when we were filming there at Anne Robinson's house. And I really found that shocking, because they'd asked me and I said, I never walked in there thinking, what if I was to have a child with a disability? Would I keep it? Would I not? And Claire changed my opinion on that, because I think I never ever thought about it. And when I thought, I remember at the time I was in a relationship, and I came back after filming and I said to my partner, you know, if we were to have a child and it be disabled, you know, what would your reaction be? Because I knew from that week on, if I was in that situation, I would go through with the pregnancy. I wouldn't terminate it. And that's my personal choice. And he straight away, he assured me, and he said, that's one thing I'll tell you now, if we were to have a child and if it was disabled, I would expect you to go through with the pregnancy, because it still is a life. And it was quite a nice, comforting conversation to have. And this is what I mean. Would I have had that conversation at the time with the partner I was with? No, I wouldn't have. So, you know, if I can be educated and bring that conversation in my relationship, and then bring that conversation within my family, you know, all we're doing is getting people to be aware of it, raising awareness for them to have conversations that some of us haven't had as kids with our parents. So that's all it was. And, you know, when Claire shared her journey of how she pitied people, and I've never looked at someone who's has a disability child as a pity. You know, it's an individual journey. If anything, I look at those people with strength, because, you know, it takes a certain type of strength to bring a child up with even more learning difficulties. So, you know, the patience you've got. So discovering that the doctor has the right to pull the plug, and the mother does. So Claire was given an option, even in the last final week, that she could terminate her pregnancy of this child because of how much it will cost the government to bring up this child on the system.
Oh my God.
Was a shock. That for me was, I think, the most deepest learning process I've taken away from that.
I've become quite emotional over that.
Yeah.
Really, like I can feel myself inside, you know.
Because, and again, you know, I don't know if you've seen on TV where they talk about these genes and designing a baby and things like that, and how science is developing. Again, we had another bit of the journey was where science, so they brought a scientist in who showed us what they can do with science right now, and how they can develop fetuses and things. And currently, they can grow a child outside of a mother's womb up to 13 weeks.
It's insane.
But in 25 years' time, they're going to be able to do full term. So where you've got cases where the father wants a child, but the mother doesn't, they'll be able to take the child out the mother's womb and grow it artificially for the child to be brought up. And for the father to have it. But then you've also got those situations right now where people are playing with science and saying you can have all these tests whilst you're pregnant, and you can almost design your baby, take out certain genes and illnesses, or if you want your child to have blue eyes. And so,
People can
again,
be
that's
spending now, can't they? Like if you've got enough money,
yeah,
celebrities are. I think it was Chrissy Teigen or something, like John Legend's wife. She
yeah.
came out with saying she chose to have a girl first. So
Did she?
yeah, no, she did. I remember it because it was a big thing that came out.
Right. No, I
I
hadn't
want
read
to ask
that.
you, yeah, I want to ask you, Kalbir, like, what would you do now? So, you know, to the next generation coming, what advice would you give to the boys and girls coming through? You know, you just talked about abortion and what you went through. You know, we've touched upon social media, domestic violence, and, you know, abuse, pressures, community pressures, cultural pressures.
Mhm.
Um, what would your advice be?
For parents, first of all, start the education at home. Talk to the kids and openly talk about sex. And if they were, talk about the possibility of them falling pregnant, what would happen? How would you deal with it as parents? How would you expect your kids to deal with it? And bring them up so they can come home and say they're pregnant.
Yeah,
And you'd rather have that child come home and tell you they're pregnant
yeah,
and guide them safely through that process and give them support mentally and physically to know what support they need. Because another thing we need to understand, it's not just a support to the women, but the men as well.
yeah,
Because mentally it has an impact on them as well. So, it can fail a relationship, it can make a relationship, it can break a relationship, and both parties need that support. Yet we're so good at going to family weddings and functions and supporting people in every other way. Let's start with that. I think, again, if you're responsible to have sex, you should be responsible to take the responsibility of it if you get someone pregnant.
yeah.
And
You could be about
how
16. It's legal.
yeah, you should be able to have those conversations with your partners. And I think as with age, it comes easy. As you're younger, you're still naive, you're discovering yourself and things like that. But this is where it comes down to the parents of having those open conversations first of all with them. So this is where I'd be honest with my uncles now. I've got my cousins that are at uni. I mean, my uncles have had this conversation that goes, well, we've given the kids our values. But then if they were to, one of my uncles said this, he goes, if my son was to come home and get a girl pregnant, he goes, I expect him to come and tell me. So that I'd be like, right, okay, how are we going to deal with the situation? Not deal with it where we brush it under the carpet, but we say, right, what are your options? What do you two want to do? And if you want to have it, we should be able to support them. If they don't want to have it, okay, what are the options? What's the safest way for both of them? And
Yeah,
I think that's such an important thing to do. And, it's not just educating the kids, and it's also the kids taking responsibility as well. I was married and I couldn't voice my journey to him and to say I wanted the child because I wasn't built up to raise my voice. And this is where it's been important to me
and
after
also
coming out my
living with his family, he had the
yeah.
support. He had the
And again, we hid it from living with living with in-laws. We hid it. They didn't know anything. They didn't even know we'd fallen pregnant.
but where would their loyalties be if it came down to it?
Oh, naturally, fair enough, their son. I mean, naturally, they would be biased towards him. They were at the process of it. But I think I'm not going to lie, they were mortified when they did find out what he put me through,
Yeah,
when they did find out, but when they heard my side of it. And that's what I think is so important, is not judging the other person as parents, but sitting them both down and remembering your child's had a responsibility towards that situation. So, don't finger point, because this whole Punjabi saying, ek ungli tin ungla apne wale, I like this kind of thing. So you're pointing a finger at someone else, you've got three fingers at yourself. Take the time to recognize what your child's done in the scenario and say, right, okay, how are we going to move forward?
and I think from
Did
what
if
you
I had a child come home and said to me she's pregnant, if my son came home and said he's got a girl pregnant, I'd be like, okay, let's sit down, let's talk about it, right? What are you going to do? Because you were responsible to have sex. You should be able to tell me now what you want to do.
I think from what you say as well, from what I take from it is learn from your own experience. We've
Yeah.
all felt isolated. We've all felt alone. We've all had that cultural pressure. We've all felt vulnerable as well. You know, would we really want our own child to go through that?
No. And then another thing, where you want to point out in this as well, with COVID happening right now, you know, at the beginning of COVID, because of the lockdown, women were not able to access abortions in Ireland and UK. I don't know
No.
if people know that, and that's around the world. They've had a lot of backlog of abortions, which women have got refused to have abortions because of the pandemic and the lockdown. There was no flights coming abroad from Ireland over, especially in certain parts of Ireland where it's really forbidden. Republic of Ireland literally were not able to come over and get flights, and Northern Ireland as well. So that's had a massive impact. That's another thing I think a lot of people haven't thought about, how the pandemic have affected people that didn't, there was no choice. You
Yeah.
know, there was no choice for women because of the pandemic.
The psychological aftermath, even not
Yeah.
but the mental health, and especially on our doctors, that you know, our healthcare professionals, our
Mm-hmm.
emergency services as well, are the impact that, you know, the government need to take into consideration of the mental health aspect of what people will be suffering.
Also, you've got where if the pregnancy's gone up to 5 months, remember there's that 20 weeks. And if
Yeah.
you've had to go over, the psychological impact it's going to have on the woman, because your body is producing all those hormones.
Of course, of course. Kabir, I'm sorry, I'm sorry to stop you because I want to speak to you more, but thank you so much. You know,
No, thank you, Sharon, for having me.
the reason I wanted you to come on is because of that. You know, you've gone into so much detail, especially around your own experiences as well, and it will only help other women and parents out there and men out there on how they need to really sort of understand what's going on in the world and how they can protect but also support their children. I think it's so important. And can you just hold your book up again so people can see?
It's Not Our Daughter, the true story of a daughter-in-law. You can get it on Amazon, guys, Kindle version and paperback. You can also on my website as well. So if you want to go onto my website page, which is www.kalbirbains.com. So you've got more information about some of the charity work I do, as well as the book you can get a hold of, and you can leave a review there or on Amazon. And then that is it, really. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for having me.